There was a knock on the door, and the CEO's wife came in. "I've made you some tea if you want some." When I heard that voice, I couldn't hold myself anymore. The CEO's wife appeared surprised, but she did not pursue the matter. Instead, she remained silent and waited for me. "I'm a grown man, and I feel so bad about this. I'm sorry. I'm really sorry." As I spoke in a strained tone, the CEO's wife said to me, "Could it be that you are—" "My name is Jacob Miller. I am 28 years old and live for work. Even though I live for my work, that doesn't mean I'm a great worker and everyone looks up to me or anything. Of course, that would be fantastic, but I know I'm not that capable. I do my best in my own way, but I lack inspiration, empathy, intelligence, and cleverness. To put it mildly, I'm only a standard level. So when it comes to me working hard, I have no choice but to work harder than anyone else, completing the tasks assigned to me with honesty, regardless of how demanding my schedule may be. That's all I can do. You know, I don't understand how you work so hard and never get sick." That is something that my friends and colleagues who observe my life frequently say. I arrive at work 2 hours earlier than usual in the morning and complete as much work as possible. I try not to waste time chatting and instead focus on my work in order to begin a new task in the afternoon. If my boss assigns me a job, I accept it regardless of time. On average, I get home around 10 p.m., and in the worst-case scenario, I take the last train home. Even on my days off, I only think about work and do what I can at home. So people around me sometimes worry that I have no life outside the office. But I have never thought of this life as painful. It is a life that I dreamed of so much, and I have finally achieved it. When I was a child, I was very sick, so I could hardly play outside. I was either in the hospital or at home from the summer of my 3rd year of elementary school until the spring of my 2nd year of middle school. I was envious of others of my age who were happily playing outside or participated in club activities. I didn't get sick because I wanted to. I don't even remember doing anything bad enough to be punished by God. I've often grumbled about my life, wondering why I was the only one who deserved to be this way. The friends who cared for me in the beginning gradually stopped visiting me. By the time I entered middle school, I had almost no friends. Of course, it's understandable that people's lives changes from elementary to middle school, and their thinking patterns change as well, becoming busier and busier. But I felt as if I was being left behind. I felt like I was the only one left behind, which made me very sad. However, there was always one person waiting for me next to me, Ethan, my childhood friend since kindergarten. To put it simply, Ethan was a bit clumsy. I guess I inherited my parents' temperament, as I was impatient. So I remember always waiting for Ethan, who was always slow to put on his shoes or run. But now Ethan was waiting for me. Ethan has always had a pleasant and gentle personality. I was not surprising that Ethan remembered me even after the other students around me had stopped visiting me. That is why I was unable to express my gratitude to Ethan or treat him well. But Ethan was my sole emotional supporter. After almost completely recovering from my illness, I was excited to start attending the same school as him in the spring of my 2nd year of middle school. But for some reason, I couldn't be honest with him. The day before the opening ceremony of the school, "I'm so excited to be going to the same school as you, Jacob." Ethan smiled as he spoke to me, but I said something I never expected to say to him. "What the hell, weirdo? Just because we've known each other since childhood doesn't mean we're going to be together forever." Ethan smiled at me, hearing those words, but he also seemed a little sad. That's how I sensed. The truth is, at that moment, "I'm just kidding. I'm happy too." I wish I could have told him that. I was too embarrassed to say it, and I couldn't. I never imagined that I would regret the insignificant stubbornness more than I could. My first day of school in 5 years, and my first day of middle school, would be the following day. Late at night, I was putting on my brand new uniform and getting my shoes ready with a little bit of anxiety and a lot of excitement. My parents were crying and rejoicing as they watched me. I was a little embarrassed, but even at that moment, I was so happy. Starting tomorrow, I will be a normal middle school student like everyone else. That's what I thought. But then we got the phone call that broke our happy family's heart. Mom dropped the receiver and had a look on her face that I had never seen before. "What's going on?" When I said that to my mom, she told me something I couldn't believe. "Ethan died in a car accident." I couldn't believe it. Ethan was just here in this house with me a few hours ago. We were supposed to be able to attend the same school starting tomorrow. Ethan had been waiting for me for the big day tomorrow. "How come you are leaving me now?" It was difficult to accept, but time passed inevitably. The next day, I went to middle school for the first time, my mind still in a state of shock. I had friends from elementary school, so it was easy for me to make new friends, but I couldn't smile sincerely, because Ethan was no longer with me. I went to Ethan's funeral the next day, but most of my school friends were not there. I had heard that Ethan used to come to see me right after school, so he didn't have many friends. I can't believe he had to abandon his normal life to care for me while I was in hospital. I know it's something he'd do, but what have I ever done for him? To my precious, precious friend, who was preoccupied with me rather than his schoolwork. In the end, I couldn't express my gratitude to him. I was the worst kind of friend, calling him weird even though I didn't mean to hurt his feelings. I'm not sure I deserve to be called his friend. I was so frustrated and sad that I couldn't stop crying during the funeral. I never imagined that this day would come. I thought I'd be able to thank and apologize to him as much as I wanted from now on. After the funeral, Ethan's parents approached me. I couldn't look them in the eye because I was so ashamed of myself. Ethan's mother handed me a big paper bag. "This appears to be something Ethan purchased to give to you. Would you mind taking it?" I had no idea what it was, but there was no way I could say no. I accepted the paper bag. I couldn't stop crying when I saw what was inside. There was a bright yellow bouquet. On the rim, "Jacob, congratulations! You're now out of hospital. We are forever friends." A message card was attached. Ethan's accident occurred just outside a flower shop in front of the station. The bouquet wasn't damaged, but when I noticed the bag was slightly dented, I realized what had happened. Ethan had gone to buy flowers for me and got into an accident. Ethan had gone to great lengths to think about me. I've never heard of a man giving flowers to another man. Even at this point, I couldn't express how grateful I was, and all I could do was hold the bouquet in my arms and cry. Ethan would still be alive if an ungrateful person like me had not been his friend. Ethan's parents had every reason to believe that, but they didn't blame me. "Thank you so much for being Ethan's friend," they said with a smile. I'd never done anything to deserve their gratitude. "I didn't do anything. I'm just an immature guy, and I'm really sorry I couldn't do anything for Ethan." All I could do was apologize to them, and I knew that Ethan was no longer here to hear me. I couldn't accept the fact that Ethan was no longer with me. I never once forgot, but day by day, I began to move on with my life. Because I knew exactly what I wanted to do when I grew up. Until then, all I wanted was to go to school and live a normal life. I was only concerned with myself. But for the first time, I found myself wanting to do something for someone else. That's what has kept me doing until now, at the age of 28. So no matter how busy I am, I have never wanted to run away from my life. However, something has been bothering me so much lately that I'm convinced I am going insane. Mr. Williams, my new boss, has been transferred from the main office. I had heard rumors that he was a strict person, but to be honest, it was more than I had imagined. I don't mind the harshness with which he speaks to me and treats me. However, the way he assigns work and treats his employees is incomparable. Furthermore, my attitude that I would do my best, no matter how difficult the work was, irritated him. And now that he was watching over me, I'm in even more trouble. I despise people who believe they are accomplishing much by devoting many hours to tasks. I believe they are simply attempting to justify their inefficiency at work. The really good ones get the job done in less time. I used to arrive at work early and work overtime, and he told me that I would not be compensated for any overtime work. But the amount of work he assigned me was too much for me to complete during my working hours. Of course, I admit that I am incompetent, but there is no denying that there is an overload of work, regardless of how anyone looks at it. Are you alright, Jacob? It's rumored that at the headquarters, people who received attention from Mr. Williams quit one after the other. Maybe you should talk to your superiors about it. My colleagues and close senior colleagues talk to me like that, but I cannot be discouraged here. I have to do what I have to do now to be useful to this company. I don't care about myself. Above all, I want to help this company. So, thanks, I'm good. I kept answering like that. Then one day, the CEO of the company visits our office, which is not far from the headquarters, on a regular basis to inspect it. Finally, I was summoned by the CEO. Despite the enormous amount of work, I am doing my best. But has my performance declined? Is it possible that my relationship with Mr. Williams has gotten so bad to the point where I will be transferred to another branch office? It was the first time the CEO had summoned me, so I entered the designated conference room with nervousness. Then the CEO said to me, "Jacob, I received a tip that Williams is abusing his authority over you. Is this true? I know it may be hard to talk about it, but I would like to hear the truth." The CEO is famous for his good personality. Despite his position as CEO, he appears to be concerned about his employees. To be honest, I was happy. If I told the truth here, I might be able to break free from my daily routine of being overworked and treated with disrespect. But I wondered if I should take the easy way out. What is the right thing to do for the company? I thought about it, but could not come up with an answer, and I could not open my mouth. Then the CEO said, "Take your time. I'll wait as long as you want." He was probably sensing my emotions. I felt like crying at the moment even though I was an adult, because those words reminded me of Ethan. A few minutes later, there was a knock on the door, and the CEO's wife came in. Although she was the wife of the CEO, she was also a vice CEO. She and her husband are both charismatic and well liked within the company. They are not your typical CEO or vice CEO in the sense that they always have a friendly and caring heart. I've known that for a long time. Perhaps sensing the situation, when she noticed the prolonged silence between me and the CEO, she said calmly, "I've made you some tea if you'd like some." Her kindness moved me to tears yet again. I couldn't stop myself. They would never have guessed I'd start crying. The CEO and his wife both looked surprised, but they didn't pursue the matter and instead sat quietly, waiting for me. The more I tried to stop crying, the more I couldn't stop crying. All I could do was grasp the teacup that had been handed to me and say, "I feel bad for crying in a place like this. Even though I'm an adult, I apologize. I'm incompetent and incapable of assisting anyone. I truly apologize." As I spoke in a strained tone, the CEO's wife asked me, "Hey, I don't mean to be rude, but what's your first name?" Without knowing why I was asked such a question, I replied, I'm Jacob Miller. When I answered that, the CEO's wife looked surprised and, Are you by any chance Jacob Moore? Ethan's friend? With that, I went blank. Because it was true. Jacob Miller was my name until my senior year of high school. Around that time, my parents divorced and my surname was changed to Miller after my mother. And I knew, of course, that the CEO and his wife were Ethan's parents, just as she had said. Ethan stood by my side, but I couldn't do anything for him. So, in order to repay Ethan, I wanted to help Ethan's parents. I've lived my life with the intention of joining Ethan's parents' company and being useful to them since the spring of my second year of middle school. But I couldn't help Ethan, and they'd probably like to forget about me being the cause of an accident. So I had been hiding my true identity this whole time. I didn't expect to be found out at a place like this, so words didn't come out right away. Nevertheless, I would not be able to keep hiding it. Yes, it's been a while. I wiped away my tears, stood up, and bowed my head. So you were the child back then? I apologize for not recognizing you. When the CEO said this and bowed, his wife burst into tears, and I knew it! You said you take on all responsibilities in the same way you did back then. I had wanted to meet you for a long time. At the time, I was so sad that Ethan was gone that I couldn't think about anything else. I couldn't express my gratitude to you, who was my son's most important friend. I was surprised at what she said. No, I'm the one who should be thanking. Ethan always put me first and was the best support I had when I was in the hospital. But I couldn't be honest with him. I may have made him feel bad. So I was really ashamed of myself and couldn't visit you or visit Ethan's grave. I'm truly sorry. I'm here at this company now because I wanted to help you both, even if it's from behind the scenes. I know it won't be enough to compensate for what I couldn't do for Ethan, but I felt that this was the only thing I could do. They looked surprised when I told them about my apology, which had kept hidden in my heart for many years, and now the CEO opened his mouth. That's not true. You gave a lot to my son Ethan. Many children were cruel to Ethan because he was feeble-minded and bad at sports since he was a child. However, Ethan always said that you were the only person who cheerfully waited for him with a smile on your face. When Ethan found out you were sick, he looked very sad. He said it was his turn to back you up at this time. That was the first time Ethan, who had never been able to make up his mind to do anything on his own, did so. As his parents, we felt you were such an important friend of his, and we could never thank you enough. I had no idea that Ethan felt that way. I was expecting him to see me as a cold friend. It was something Ethan and I never discussed, and maybe we were both looking for an opportunity to say it to each other. The truth I learned after 15 years. I felt embarrassed, frustrated, happy. I couldn't understand these feelings myself. Then, now the CEO's wife started to speak. Thank you so much for still caring about Ethan. I'm sure Ethan would be pleased if he knew what's going on right now. And even if it wasn't possible, I think Ethan would have understood. Before he left the house to go buy flowers, he said you might say you don't want them because you're shy. But he also said you take good care of them so they didn't wither. I know how he is, and he smiled when he said that. Hearing those words, the tears that had stopped welling up began to flow again. I knew Ethan was always one step ahead of me. He could even tell when I wasn't being honest with him. I not only carefully arranged the flowers he gave me that day, but I also dried them so they will last forever. I'm not a flower person, but I keep them in my room. Ethan, who was 13 years old, was right. The CEO's wife said one more thing to me as I was looking down and crying again. But from now on, please live your life. I am sure Ethan would want you to do that too. I think what he most wants is for you to live your own life. With those words, I felt as if all of my tension had been released. No matter what they say, I still wanted to repay Ethan and his parents. At the same time, I feel as if I could be more concerned with my own feelings, to value my life, which Ethan had helped me with. I reasoned that by doing so, I might be able to make Ethan happy. Then I began to confess about Mr. Williams' abuse of authority, about myself, and about the other employees. I told him everything I knew. As a result, Mr. Williams was returned to the corporate headquarters and demoted to a regular employee in order to change his attitude. I can now work with more motivation within a reasonable time frame. Surprisingly, I am able to work more efficiently and effectively, and I became more useful to the company. For a long time, I was indebted to Ethan and his parents. From now on, I intend to do my best to repay them while also enjoying life to the fullest and not overworking myself. Mom, I'm getting married. My mom looked surprised for a moment before smiling at me when I said this. Then she gently hugged me. That's great! I am so happy for you! She looked me in the eyes once more, her face swollen with tears. I have to tell your father about this. She then went to the place where my dad's picture was displayed. She sat down in front of it, and I sat diagonally behind her. Darling, Sophia is getting married. With that, she stared at the picture. I also informed my dad about my marriage. Perhaps it was just my imagination, but the smile on my father's face in the photograph appeared softer than usual. By the way, Sophia, how old are you now? Mom turned around and asked me. Come on, I'm 25 years old. I see. It's already been 10 years since then. My dad died of sickness when I was in 9th grade. Since then, my mom and I have been living together. Sophia, thank you for being my daughter up to this point. I'll keep looking forward to spending time with you. My mom suddenly said that. Well, I'll have to prepare dinner. And then she hurriedly went to the kitchen. I had something important to say to my mom that day, but she beat me to it. I completely missed out, because she said exactly what I was thinking. My dad brought a new mother into our family when I was in 2nd grade of elementary school. I don't remember my real mother. Before the new mother came, the mom I knew was a lovely lady in the picture, smiling as she held me in her arms when I was a baby. About a year after this picture was taken, she became a star. When I was just a little girl, my dad quietly told me. So when my dad introduced me to my new mom one day, I was so excited and nervous that I hid behind my dad and fidgeted. Then she bent down in front of me, smiled, and said, Sophia, nice to meet you. My new mom took very good care of me. She was always kind and sometimes strict. She always made snacks for me in the evenings so I wouldn't be lonely because I was our family's only child. I loved her pancakes and cookies. I was very happy to see my favorite family member when I returned home because I was a latchkey child until the 1st grade of elementary school. Every day after class, I wanted to go home as soon as possible. I'd walk home with friends who were going into the same direction, but once we parted ways, I'd dash the rest of the way home. My mom was good at cooking and sewing, and on sports days and field trips, I was secretly pleased that my close friends envied me. This person who was always by my side was the only mom I had. I was always by her side, as if to compensate for the time I had missed receiving attention by my mom.
You two are always so close.
My dad would sometimes say these things to me on purpose, as if he was jealous. That's because I love my mom. Whenever I said that, my mom would smile kindly at me. But when I was in the upper grades of elementary school, I became vaguely familiar with the legal parent-child relationship. At first, I only assumed that this was similar to my situation. Then I started to wonder what my mom thought of me. I started to worry about what would happen to me if I had a younger brother or sister. She did not become distant, but I no longer stayed by my mom's side all the time, begging for her attention as I used to. My mom came to school on the day of class observation in elementary school. Then, one of my close friends said something that made me very uncomfortable. You don't look much like your mom, do you? I knew my friend didn't mean to offend me in any way, but I was so shocked. I realized that no one recognized me as my mom's child. I felt depressed thinking about that. On the day of class observation, we were in math class, which I excelled at, but I never once raised my hand. You didn't appear to be in a good mood today. Is something going on? When I got home that day, my mom approached me with a worried expression and served me sweets as usual. No, it's nothing. That was all I could manage to answer. After that, I wondered more than ever what my mom thought of me. I thought about asking her several times, but I couldn't because I was afraid that mentioning it would ruin our relationship. About 3 years later, my cell phone rang one evening. I was studying for the middle school entrance exam, and my parents had finally bought me a cell phone for emergency contact when I reached 9th grade. I couldn't use it during class because it was against the rules. We were, however, permitted to use cell phones on our way to and from school. I checked my phone's display and discovered that my mom was calling. I assumed she had timed her call to coincide with the end of class. Hello? On the phone, she sounded terrified. We've got a problem, Sophia. Your dad collapsed. His office informed me that he was taken to the hospital. I rushed to the hospital, as instructed by my mom. I was so panicking that I don't remember what happened after that. Good morning. It was the morning of the day after my dad's funeral. She was cheerful and bright as usual. I was depressed all the time because of the shock of losing my dad so suddenly. She was probably forcing herself to be cheerful because she was worried about me. I couldn't, however, be considerate of her feelings. For a while after that, I had very few conversations with my mom. When she tried to talk to me, I would just respond absently, and the days passed. About a week after my dad's death, I caused an incident. Do your best. My mom called out to me as I was getting ready to leave for school for the first time in a long time. For some reason, this casual phrase irritated me. What? Are you saying I'm not doing my best? I'm doing my best. You have no right to say that to me. I still can't explain why I said such a terrible thing. I wasn't addressing her as my mom. Of course, I didn't mean to harm her. I still vividly recall my mom's sad face at that time. For a while after that, my mom and I did not speak to each other at all. On the day of the parent-teacher conference to decide which school to attend, we had our first conversation in a long time. If you work a little harder, you will be able to attend a higher level school than the one you are currently pursuing. Why not give it a shot? My homeroom teacher said to me. I had considered attending that high school several times. Despite the fact that it was a public high school, it was about 40 minutes away by bus and train from my house. The cost of commuting to school would be ridiculous, and I was thinking of going to a high school near my house that I could walk to. If you want to go, I'll back you up. I'm not going to tell you to do your best. Go when you want to go. Mom said that over dinner that day. I knew that with my academic ability at the time, I was on the borderline, and there was no guarantee that I would be accepted. If I do not get in, I will have to attend a private school, which will be more expensive than a public school. This would impose a significant financial burden on the family budget. Even as a junior high school, I thought I understood the difficulty of raising a child on one's own. Given that I could never fail, I reasoned that I should attend a nearby high school. But my mom's expression was serious as she locked her gaze on me. Let me give it my all. I made up my mind. After putting in a lot of effort, I was accepted into the high school of my dreams. I was also able to enroll in a teaching college. After graduating from university, I worked as a teacher at a nearby elementary school. Then I fell in love with a man I met at my second school, and a year later he proposed to me. My mom and I were having dinner as usual the day before the wedding. We're having our last dinner together, so why not have a drink today? I was the one who said that. I said it casually, but she seemed to have planned it from the start. I assumed she had gone to the kitchen, but she returned with something in her arms. This wine was made in the year you were born. With that, she handed me a bottle of wine. I was curious why such a thing was prepared. I heard your father purchased it on the day you were born. She started to explain. Before I married him, your father wanted me to know everything about you. So he told me about what happened after you were born. Of course, he told me about your birth mother. At the same time, he told me about this wine. He said he bought it for the entire family to drink when you get married. I recall him saying it with a smile. So let's drink it today with your father. With that, she brought a picture of my dad. Then my mom and I discussed my father, the two of us, and about the man who would marry me, and so on. Then, perhaps a little tipsy, she brought me a small cassette tape. I recognized it as coming from the answering machine we used to have in the house when I was a kid. A date was written on the cassette tape. The date was the day of my dad's funeral. That day, I was nervous and concerned about what would happen. So I called home from the funeral home, knowing full well that no one would answer. I thought your dad was listening. I told him everything that was on my mind. I believe this tape is the reason I've been able to work so hard up to this point. Even now, I believe this tape is the link between your father, me, and you. That's why I want you to listen to it too. Mom then stood up and went into the other room to get the old answering machine. Then, a little embarrassed, she pressed the play button. Immediately, I heard Mom's voice. However, it was more of a sob than a voice. She started speaking quietly after a few moments of sobbing. Darling, what should I do now? I have no idea what to do. Please tell me. I should have talked to you more about what I should do. Sophia is, of course, our precious daughter, regardless of what anyone says. I know that, but now that you are gone, I'm not sure I can raise her properly on my own from now on. But I know that if I whine, you will be worried. So I have made up my mind. I will live strongly from tomorrow. But please allow me to whine for a moment. And please watch over us from afar. I couldn't stop the tears from welling up in my eyes from the middle of the recording. My mom's cheerful attitude was an act to keep me from being sad the day after my dad's funeral. I was still too young, even though I was in middle school, to understand how my mom felt. Mom was filled with anxiety and on the verge of collapse at the time, but she kept it hidden. So I won't be concerned. I finally understood. Thank you, Mom. I looked at her as I said this, but she was sleeping peacefully. Mom was her usual self on the wedding day. She went around the room, greeting everyone politely, from relatives and acquaintances to my friends. The ceremony went smoothly, and then it was time to read my thank you message to my mom. The spotlights were shining on me. I began quietly reading a letter that contained memories of me, my dad, and my mom. I could hear sobs coming from everywhere in the hall, and I almost started to cry myself. But I held back my tears until the very end. I knew if I blew this opportunity, I'd never be able to tell my mother those words again. My eyes welled up with tears as I finished reading the message. When I looked at my mom beside me, she was holding her eyes and shaking her shoulders. She smiled when she realized I was looking at her. I suddenly remembered her expression when we first met, when she bent down on her knees and smiled at me. And as I finished reading the thank you letter, I kept repeating to myself the words I had always wanted to say to her. Mom, thank you so much for being my mom up to this point. You will always be my mom. I got married last month. My recent wedding held a surprise. I have a dad whom I love very much. He is now in heaven. When he was 19, he married my mom, who is the same age as him, and I was born that winter. My dad had always loved motorcycles and has wanted to be a motorcycle racer since he was 16 years old. However, he gave up his professional career due to an injury. When he married my mom, Mom's parents were very opposed to the idea. I will put my life at risk to work hard and to protect my family. With that, he married my mom despite their objections. Dad worked hard for the family until the day he died, just as he promised Mom's parents. And on his days off, he always played with me. He looked after our family well, and we always ate dinner together as a family. My dad had always granted my selfish wishes. For example, when I told him I wanted to practice riding a bicycle when I was 4 years old, he spent the entire day with me at the park. He also picked me up from daycare on a daily basis, without fail. Every day, I bathed with my dad and slept on his thin arm. I will never forget the day he passed away. I was 5 years old. My younger brother was 3, and it happened on my dad's 24th birthday. He crashed into a guardrail while touring on his motorcycle for the first time in many years and never returned home. He was severely injured all over his body and died instantly. Surprisingly, the face I saw in the hospital was so beautiful that he appeared to be smiling. I was still too young to understand what death was like. My mom and relatives kept crying, and my dad had his face covered with white cloth. I vividly recall staring at the scene with my younger brother. I don't remember crying at the time, because I was like that. I didn't realize that my dad would be gone and that I would be sad. I didn't understand what it meant when I found out I wouldn't be able to see my dad anymore. My dad, who had been picking me up from daycare every day until that point, was unable to come, so my mom and brother came to pick me up. I still didn't understand anything about the situation. Why didn't Dad come today? I asked my mom. Your dad has gone to the distant sky. From now on, me, Jack, and you will live together. Daddy is gone. I still remember how I couldn't stop crying when my mom told me with red eyes. No way! I'm riding Dad's motorcycle home today and tomorrow as usual, and I'm going to take a bath with him. I'm going to see him again. I went to bed crying, holding my dad's picture for the rest of the day. Until the wedding, I assumed that Dad had died in an accident. The day before the wedding, I emailed my mom and asked, please keep Dad's photograph in his seat until the moment I read the letter. If I saw my dad's picture during the ceremony, I'd definitely cry. Dad loved my smiling face the most. And then, alright, good luck tomorrow, Your dad is watching you from above. Don't weep. You've got this. She replied to me quickly. I was on the verge of tears just reading that response. I kept cool and wrote a thank you letter to my parents, which I planned to read at the ceremony the next day. I wrote a very long letter to Mom, but the letter to my dad was even longer, more than twice as long as the letter to my mom. The next day, the ceremony finally started. It was a small, cozy wedding where relatives, mutual friends, and people from my husband's workplace attended. It was a really warm wedding ceremony. Finally, the finale arrived. My letter to my parents. Finally, it was time to read it. I had asked a friend to preside over the wedding. She is a good friend who knows all about my situation. Now, here is the bride's letter to her parents. Can both parents make an appearance in front of the newlyweds? With a smile, the newlyweds would like to thank you all. I first greeted my husband's parents before reading my letter to my mom. I was crying hard while I was reading it. I finally picked up a letter to my dad in heaven after I finished reading the letter to my mom. My hands were trembling, and the letter's words were soon obscured by tears. Dear Dad, Dad, you were so kind to me. I quickly choked on the words and couldn't go on. I had written so many things yesterday. I looked up from the letter and saw Dad's photograph in Mom's hand. Mom's big tears fell on Dad's photograph, and Dad in the photo appeared to be crying too. Dad, Dad. I looked up at my friend, the MC. I don't care how long it takes. Tell your dear father in heaven how you feel. Come on. That was written on the cue card she had in her hand. I strained my voice. Dad, I love you forever and ever. Dad. After that, I couldn't say anything else. There were so many things I wanted to say. And suddenly, Emma! Emma! I heard a familiar voice. What? Was that Dad's voice? I thought it was an auditory hallucination. Then the MC said, Now, here's the surprise. The bride's father has sent us a message of congratulations from heaven, and we have received it. Please look at the big screen in front of you. My friend, the MC, who said that, was also crying and could barely speak. I turned my gaze to the large screen, unsure what was going on. There, I saw my dad before he died, whom I adored. Before I knew it, my mom was there beside me. She squeezed my hand. Don't look away, she said. Dad was shown in the hospital bed, wearing his favorite Adidas jersey at the time, for some reason. Honey, can I begin? I'm already recording. Hurry up and start. I truly miss that voice. That's my dad's voice. Well, Emma, congratulations on your marriage. At the time, I had no idea what I was saying. I wonder if you've grown up to be as beautiful as your mother. I couldn't help but ask my mom, who was standing beside me. Wait, what is this? I looked at Mom and repeated my question. She was sobbing uncontrollably, and she turned my gaze to the large screen. Be quiet and just watch, she told me firmly. Dad's voice continued. I'm currently battling an illness, Emma. You may not realize it yet, but my illness appears to be very serious. I may not be able to stay with you until you've grown up. But I love you. I love you so much, and you're my precious treasure. Sometimes you make such selfish requests, but because I adore you, I want to grant all of your wishes. But the next time you request something selfish, I may be unable to grant it. Don't cry, honey. You promised to film me while smiling. Come on, smile. I'm going to record you. Stop it. One was young too. This brings back memories. I'm sorry, Emma. I'm sick. I'm not sure how much longer I have. How can I explain this to you? They said I could only go to bed with you about 30 more times. But if I take the medicine, I'll be able to talk with you and Jack a lot more. But it looks like I'll only be able to see you two in the hospital, not at home. I don't want to do that, so I'm going to stay at home with you, Jack and Mom, instead of taking the medicine. You're always saying selfish things, but please allow me to be selfish with you just this once. The video stopped once there. My mom took over the microphone from the MC and began speaking. I appreciate you planning such a pleasant surprise today. My husband, the bride's father, was killed in an accident, but he had terminal cancer before that. He wanted me to film wedding speech videos for his favorite daughter and son before he died. I have kept them until now. He also desired one last ride on his favorite motorcycle before passing away. He had a seizure while out with his friends, got into an accident and died. I stated that telling such a dark story at a celebration is not appropriate. However, the groom suggested that I take this chance to share it with you all. Thank you very much. I apologize, but we still have a little more to show you on the video, so please bear with us. I didn't know anything. I couldn't help but mumble as I watched the video. This video was taken when my dad was in hospital for a one-day checkup. Because until he died, there wasn't a single day when Dad didn't pick me up from daycare. It was just heartbreaking. Emma, I will always love you. I wish I could have had drinks with you. I wish I could hold your children in my arms. I wanted to see them grow up for a long time. But I'm sorry, it's not possible. But Emma, this is the last thing I want you to promise me. Even though I'm gone, remember to obey your mother. This is Mommy with your younger brother. Please keep loving me and your mother forever. Even if I'm gone, don't forget about me. Thank you for being our daughter. Thank you for becoming a member of our family. Thank you for showering me with kisses, even if it was only for a short time. Thank you for joining me in bath. Emma, I wish you a happy ever after with the person you've chosen. Congratulations, Emma. I love you. I'm so sorry. The video ended here. I cried the whole time. My friends and relatives were all crying. I'll never forget how when the video came to an end, everyone turned to the screen and clapped for a long, long time. The last words I spoke to my dad. Dad, the next day off, we're going bowling. Sure, we'll all go together after I ride my motorcycle and return. I will never forget the smile on my dad's face. I will never forget it. Thank you, Dad. I will be happy. So please look down from heaven on me. There is one thing that's been on my mind. It has been bothering me so much that I am unable to do any work. It is the contents of my wife's cell phone. My wife and I have been married for 3 years and have never cheated on each other. Maybe she's just hiding it, but I don't think so. Of course, I have never had an affair. We met in our first year of college, and I asked her out in our second year. During our freshman year, we all hung out a lot, went out drinking, and so on. She was in that group, and while I spoke with her frequently, I was drawn to various aspects of her. She had lovely eyes, for example, and she paid close attention to me. When I talked to her, no matter how down I was, she would lift my spirits. She would reach out to me, no matter how bad I was feeling. I couldn't help but fall in love with her. She appeared to be interested in me as well, and she quickly accepted my proposal. I was overjoyed because I was prepared to be dumped in the worst-case scenario. We dated for 5 years. On her birthday that year, I proposed to her. Here's what I said to her when I proposed. I can no longer live without you. Please marry me. I struggled with what to say until the day before, and this is the phrase I came up with. It may have sounded uncool, but it was the best proposal word for me. When she heard what I said, I can't live without you either. I'd love to. That's what she said. I still remember how happy I was. Later, I became a little worried and asked her, "How did you feel about my proposal?" I gave it a lot of thought, but I couldn't think of anything else besides what I said. I'm sure it wasn't cool, was it? Yes, it was a little uncool, but the fact that you genuinely care about me is the coolest thing in the world. And I could tell you couldn't live without me. That made me very happy. That's what she told me. I was relieved, but then I thought to myself, I guess I wasn't that cool after all, and dropped my shoulders. We've strayed a little bit, but 3 years have passed since then. I came home from work one day and said, "I'm home," as usual, but there was no response. I was curious as to what was wrong. I went back into the house and discovered my wife taking a bath. Normally, I get a response, but because she was in the bath, she didn't, which was fine. So I washed my hands, goggled, changed out of my suit and sat down on the couch. Then I discovered my wife's cell phone, which had been left open on the table in front of the couch. My wife's cell phone is an old flip phone, and I was wondering why it was left open. I tried not to move the phone and just looked at it, and saw a screen crammed with incoming emails. The screen only displayed the sender and the title, but no sender's name, and they were from an unknown phone number. "I want to meet you right now," or "Today is the day I met you," were the subject lines of those emails. Those messages drew my attention. I was so surprised that I couldn't help but mumble, "What? What exactly is going on?" I tried to get a good look at them, but, "Oh, you're home. Do you want to have supper?" My wife spoke to me. I was feeling bad about looking at her phone without her permission, and I was a little agitated because I couldn't believe my wife had been reading a mysterious email that was almost certainly sent by a guy. I tried not to show my displeasure by saying, "Yeah, I'm home. I'm going to eat first. Oh, but first, I think I'll go to take a bath." "I see. I'll start making dinner then," my wife said to me with a smile. I was alone in the bathtub, lost in thought. Could there have been an error in the contents of my wife's cell phone that I had just witnessed? We've been married for 3 years, and there was no way I could have sent her text messages like that. Is it possible that she's meeting another man? I'm sure my wife wouldn't do such a thing. But I believe it is still too early to draw that conclusion. I don't want to cast doubt on my wife, in whom I have complete faith. So I decided to trust my wife, telling myself that there had to be a mistake. And I was getting bloated just thinking about it in the bath. So I got out of bath and stopped thinking about her. I enjoyed chatting with her while eating the most delicious dinner she had prepared. I was relieved to see her acting normally, and I got a good night's rest for tomorrow's work. The next day, I'm not good at getting up in the morning. My wife usually wakes me up. But for some reason, I was able to get up by myself today. But I believe I understand why I was able to stand. It was probably because my mind was preoccupied with the contents of my wife's cell phone that I saw yesterday. Even though I trust my wife, I am still concerned about certain issues. Then, my wife came to my room. She said, "Good morning." "What? This is unusual. I didn't expect you to wake up on your own. Breakfast is ready, so come down whenever you're ready." With that, she went back to the living room. What am I thinking? I wondered, and finished preparing. I was on the train to work after eating my wife's delicious breakfast as usual. Morning rush hour is always crowded, and I've never been able to find a seat on the train. But I prefer standing today. I was still thinking about the contents of my wife's cell phone that I had seen the day before. I sighed without realizing it. When I sighed, I noticed that the people around me were giving me angry looks. They must dislike people sighing on a crowded train in the morning. But I didn't have time to worry about that now. I arrived at the office smoothly and began working as usual. However, I couldn't get the incident out of my head and couldn't concentrate on my work. Then, I heard a voice saying to me, "Hey, your hands are not moving. It's unusual to see you loafing on the work." It was my boss. I was taken aback and quickly apologized to him, explaining that I was only thinking and not slacking off. Then my boss said, "That's okay, but if you need anything, I'm here to help you, so let me know." He said in a kind tone, so I thanked him. And so I invited my boss to lunch and told him the story. Then my boss said, "She's obviously cheating on you. There is no doubt about it in my opinion," he stated confidently. Hearing those words, I was seriously depressed. All I could do was nod my head. My mind went blank, and I had no energy to work since the afternoon. However, my supervisor said to me, "Get your act together. It is during these times that you must work harder. It's a lot easier when you direct your rage at work." I guess he wanted to encourage me. His words made me feel a little better. I worked hard enough in the afternoon to make up for lost time in the morning. Surprisingly, when I focused on my work, I had no time to think about anything else. But work was over and it was time to go home. I'm now on the rush hour train. I was thinking about what I was going to do. I was recalling what my boss had said to me at lunch today. I guess there is no doubt about it. So I decided to act and search for physical evidence. I returned home and announced that I was home as usual, but there was no response. I changed out of my suit and sat on the sofa, just as I had done the day before. And just like yesterday, there was my wife's cell phone. For some reason, she left it open again today. She seemed to want me to see it. I noticed that my hand was reaching for the phone, and I noticed that the mailbox was open when I looked at the screen. All I could see were a number of random messages I'd sent, such as, "I'm on my way home now." However, there was a folder at the bottom that contained emails that I had previously seen. There were probably 100 of them, all sweet messages from the mystery man to my wife. The moment I saw them, I was filled with anger. When my wife came out of the bathroom, I became so emotional that I questioned her. "What's going on? Are you having an affair with me? Who is this guy who sent you the email?" I said in a slightly louder tone. Then my wife took me by surprise. My wife was confused at first, then burst out laughing. I was expecting my wife to make a troubled face and cry, and for us to end up in hell. "Oh my goodness, this is hilarious. Have you forgotten about the emails you sent me?" That's what she said. I believe I was looking at her with a dumbfounded expression. I did not understand what my wife meant. But when I thought about it calmly, I realized something. The emails were from a long time ago. It was so obvious that I felt embarrassed that I hadn't noticed it sooner. I didn't realize it until my wife told me. The sender's phone number was my old cell phone number. Meanwhile, my wife's phone battery was running low. Because she had been using the same phone for years, the battery must have worn out. Because the cell was old and nearly broken, it had been left open. If I don't make sure it's tightly closed, it stays on forever. That's what she said. Because I got home early from work, she was always taking a bath when I got home, and she couldn't even get out of the tap to greet me. I immediately lost all my strength and collapsed on the sofa. "What? Did you think I was cheating on you?" My wife innocently poked me on the cheek. I explained to her. I was taken aback. "Anyway, I believe your phone is too old. Why don't you replace it?" I was going to change the subject, but "I don't want those emails to disappear," she said that. I was starting to feel bad about snooping on her phone. I apologized and said I was sorry for looking at her phone without her permission, and she laughed. "You're the only one who will love me so much." With that, she hugged me. Then she hugged me a little tighter and said, "I can't live without you. On the contrary, I can live as long as I have you. That's how much you mean to me. So you don't have to worry about anything." I returned a hug and thanked her, telling her that I felt the same way. On my next day off, I got my wife a new cell phone. It was the latest smartphone at that time. My wife was initially hesitant, but I told her she could save her phone messages by transferring them to a memory card. "If that's the case, I'm willing to switch," she replied with a smile. My wife appeared to be struggling with the phone because she was unfamiliar with it. Of course, I paid for the phone with money from my own pocket. This is my way of apologizing for inappropriately looking at her phone. When I got home from work, my wife was preparing dinner. I said, "I need to talk to you," to my wife. She sat down without saying a word. She had a straight face, but her eyes were full of pain. Looking at her face, I didn't know where to begin, but I had to say it. "I want a divorce." I said these words calmly. My wife's expression didn't change. She just quietly asked back, "Why?" When I dared not to answer that question, my wife finally became angry. My wife threw her spoon and plate and screamed, "You're not a man!" After that, we finally didn't exchange a word. That night, I could hear my wife sobbing. I know. She wanted to know why we were in this situation, but I could never give her an explanation that would satisfy her. The real reason I wanted a divorce was because I was having an affair. I was in love with another woman, Yuna, and I no longer loved my wife. I just pitied her. I had a deep sense of guilt as I wrote up the divorce papers. In it, I stated that I was transferring the house, the car, and the stock I currently owned to my wife. My wife glanced at it, tore it up, and looked at me coldly. My wife, whom I had spent 10 years of my life with, had become a stranger to me. Everything that she had done for me, I felt really bad that it had to end this way because of me. But I couldn't turn away anymore from the feeling that I love Yuna. After tearing up the papers, my wife finally started screaming and crying. This may sound strange, but I was a little relieved to see her cry. The divorce was now final. The word divorce, that had been haunting me like a curse for the past few weeks, had finally become a reality. The next day, I came home late from work. When I returned home, my wife was on the table, concentrating on writing something. Dinner was not yet ready, but I had no appetite, so I just collapsed into bed and fell asleep. I woke up in the middle of the night to find my wife still at the table writing something. I was no longer interested and went back to sleep. In the morning, my wife confronted me with what she said were the terms of our divorce. She said she didn't want the house, the car, the stocks, or anything else. But instead, she wanted a month to prepare. And my wife's condition was that during that 1 month, we would live as much as possible as we had in the past. The reason was clear. Our son has a very important tournament coming up in a month. She didn't want to upset him as much as possible. I immediately agreed with her on that. But she had another condition. The day we were married, when we went out to get a marriage license, I want you to remember how you picked me up and carried me to the front door. And for the next month, just as you did then, every morning when I go to work, I want you to pick me up and carry me to the front door, she said. I thought she had finally gone crazy. But I didn't want to get into any more trouble with my wife, so I silently accepted her conditions. I told Yuna about this. Yuna said, "What is she thinking? She's getting a divorce anyway. She's such an idiot." I laughed so hard. My wife and I hadn't had any physical intimacy at all for years. I hadn't even held her hand for a while, so the first day I picked my wife up and took her to the front door. Both of us felt awkward and strange. But our son was so happy that he clapped his hands and followed behind us. "I guess Daddy's gonna carry Mommy off." As soon as I heard those words, my heart ached. My wife kept her eyes closed softly. "Please don't tell him about the divorce," she whispered in my ear. I nodded silently. But for some reason, I was still very upset inside as I did so. I quietly dropped my wife off at the door, and she walked straight to the bus stop and went to work. I drove my son to school as usual and went to work. On the second morning, I felt a little more comfortable than the first day. My wife was leaning against my chest, and I picked her up. I suddenly noticed a faint scent coming from her blouse and thought, when was the last time I had seen my wife this close? I was astonished to realize that she was no longer the wife of my youth. Her face was covered with fine lines and wrinkles, and also had some streaks of gray hair. Seeing this, I realized how long we had been married. For that brief moment, I asked myself. I wondered what I had done to my wife. On the morning of the fourth day, when I picked up my wife, I suddenly felt that feeling that had once been between us. This was the woman I had cherished, the one who had believed in me, who had given me everything and married me. On the fifth day, the sixth day, the feeling grew stronger. I did not tell Yuna about this. As the days went by, I felt it getting easier and easier each day to pick up my wife. I simply thought that since I was doing this every morning, I might have gained some strength in my arms. One morning, my wife was picking out her clothes for the day. She sat in front of the mirror and tried on many outfits, but still couldn't seem to find one that fit her perfectly. Then she sighed. "All of them have become too big." When I heard those words, I was flabbergasted. My wife had somehow lost weight. It was not because my arm strength had increased that I could pick her up more easily, but because she lost weight. I was astonished. That much. I didn't notice it because she always looked so unconcerned. I wondered if she had kept the bitter and painful feelings of her divorce inside her heart to the extent that she had lost so much weight. I reached out my hand and touched her. Then my son came. "Daddy, take Mommy in your arms. It's time to say goodbye." For my son, to see his father picking up Mom every morning have already become an important part of his daily life. My wife gently called my son to come to her and hugged him tightly with all her might. I looked away. If I didn't, I was afraid I would change my mind at the last minute. I silently took my wife in my arms as usual and carried her to the front door. She just gently put her arms around my neck. I found myself hugging her tightly. Yes, just like the day we got married. As I felt her lightened body in my arms, I felt an inexpressible sadness. And on the last morning, when I picked her up in my arms, I couldn't take one more step. My son had already left for school that day. I took my wife firmly in my arms and said, I didn't realize until now how much we didn't feel each other's warmth, or how much time we didn't communicate face to face. And I headed off to work as usual. I was afraid that something would rush me, that I would change my decision at the last minute. As if to shake it off, I stopped the car, jumped out without locking the door, and went up to the upper floor where my office was located. I have to get to the office before I change my mind. Quickly, to Yuna in her office. I opened the door and Yuna was there. The moment I saw her, I couldn't help but speak up. Yuna, I'm sorry. I can't get a divorce. Yuna was taken aback and put her hand on my forehead. Are you okay? Do you have a fever? I removed Yuna's hands from my forehead and said again, Yuna, I'm really sorry. I can't divorce her. The reason my marriage with my wife was so boring wasn't because I didn't love her. I just turned my back on her. My wife is the most important thing to me. That's why I can't divorce her. Sorry. Yuna finally seemed to understand what was going on and slapped my cheek as hard as she could, slammed the door shut, and ran out, screaming and crying. On my way home from work, a flower shop caught my eye. I had a bouquet made for my wife and carried the flowers for her. I don't think this will make her forgive me, but I will apologize sincerely, and we will try to start over again. I made up my mind and headed home. I found my wife lying cold on the bed. I knew absolutely nothing about it. I didn't know anything about it. I didn't even know that she had cancer. I was so obsessed with another woman that I did not even realize that my wife had been fighting desperately against the disease for the past few months. She knew that she was going to die soon. The terms of her divorce were not to blame me, but to protect me, my son, and my family. To protect me from being blamed by my beloved son after her death, so that he would not be left alone. Every morning, his father picking up his mother and gently sending her off. To my son who saw me like that every morning, I was not a terrible father who forced his mother to divorce him, but a kind father who loved his mother to the end. My wife was such a lovely woman. I deeply regretted what I did. I only regret that I realized it too late. I wish I could have done more to atone for my sins. I wish I could have hugged her more. Because I couldn't do anything for my wife, I will cherish this family that she protected. I'm sorry. Thank you. I love you.